We're told then that he decided to follow that guidance, to take Mary as his wife and go through the marriage as they had planned. So how do we break this down and find meaning that applies to us in our life? Well, let's go back and unwrap the story a little bit more. The first thing that he definitely did was he made no accusation. He made no excuses. Have any of you ever noticed when somebody asks you a question, are you going to go to the party tonight? Does anyone besides me feel the need to give them this long explanation of why I'm not going? And it has to be good enough that they'll accept it. And some folks believe they have to dress it up to make it good enough, sprinkle it with lies or whatever. What would life be like if we made no accusations and we made no excuses? If we let go of the victim consciousness, if we let go of why this happened, the father of mathematics says, the heart has its reasons which reason can never know. There's a part of us, there's the mind of us that can never quite comprehend why something happens. But the Joseph principle, the part of us that acts, the part of us that is creating the opportunity for the truth of who we are to be born, not only in spirit but in truth, is the same part of us that facilitates peace in our life. That is the part of us that must get beyond blaming, shaming, making excuses. I make no accusations. Will you say that together with me? I make no accusations. So in 1950, there was a young man named Julio who lived in Madrid. His dream had always been to be a goalkeeper in soccer. And he practiced and practiced, and he finally accomplished it. He was the professional goalkeeper for the soccer team, the Real Madrid. He loved his life. He had accomplished his dream. But after he had been doing this for a while, Julio was in a car accident, and it was near fatal. It caused him to be partially paralyzed, and for over 2 years he could not walk. And so overnight, his career, his hopes, his dream, everything was shattered. And as he lay in that hospital bed, he was so filled with anger and confusion. All he could focus on is, why did this happen? And accusing this person, accusing that person. A friend of his father came in and he said, Julio, you must let go of your angry accusations. He said that the guy told him that, and then the next day he came back and he brought an old guitar. And Julio was still very angry, but he started plucking away at this guitar, trying to exercise his hand. And he began to write poems and began to express his anger, which finally gave way to sadness, which finally gave way to a new passion that started to dance inside of him for playing the guitar. Well, by 1968, he was doing much better, and he had actually written a little song, and he won a competition for an original song that he wrote. His passion grew, his success continued, and in 1983, he won a Diamond Record Award for more records in more languages than any other artist in the world. Anybody want to guess? You got it. Julio Iglesias. That is his story. And you know, his son, Enrique, has followed in his footsteps, who is also an incredibly talented musical artist. Sometimes when life interrupts our plans, anybody else had life interrupt your plans? Yeah. I've often heard, if you just tell God your plans, if you need to find out if you have a sense of humor. Life has a way of interrupting our plans. Well, Joseph's plans were interrupted. And the first thing that we can learn from him is the power of, I make no accusations. Just as in the life of Julio, when he was willing to let go of the blaming and open himself up, a new gift came in. I make no accusations. The second thing that we know Joseph did in making no accusations was he obviously was moved with love. Now, the story of Joseph is just a few lines in the Bible, but you can imagine if you had invested yourself in sharing your life with a person and all of a sudden that changed, you don't just bounce out of that overnight. He had to have been angry. A lot of things occurred within him. But yet what we know was he absolutely was moved with love, because he made the highest and best decision that he could possibly make. And love often calls us to find it on our own. There's a story of King Arthur and his knights who, they were always looking for the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail symbolic of our divinity, our Christness. In this particular story, all of King Arthur's knights were searching for the Holy Grail, and it was believed to be in this massive forest. And so he told all of them to surround the forest, and when they found a place that was the darkest of dark and the thickest of thick, with no path before them, then and only then could they enter and set out to find the Holy Grail. And one person questioned and said, "Why must we enter in this manner?" King Arthur replied, "If you can see a path in front of you, it isn't your path, but that of someone who has gone before. You must travel your own path in order to find the Holy Grail." The path of love is an individual path. It is our own path. William Miller is a distinguished professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Mexico. And he had spent quite a lot of time studying how people's lives can change. But as a psychologist and a psychiatrist, a prominent professor, he really did not want to study love and spirituality. Yet something within him kept telling him that it was the power of love that would lead to the power to transform. So in 1989, Bill Miller was planning to take a sabbatical, a year-long sabbatical in Australia with his family. And it says all of his family would want, except one would be going. His 14-year-old adopted daughter, Lillian, had gone through a particularly rebellious period and was living at a girls' ranch. One day before the family left for Australia, Miller went to visit her, only to find that she was as angry as ever and totally refused to even see him. So he turned around and drove home again. Then later that week she called, and on the phone he heard a different voice. There was something different about the voice I was hearing, he said. His daughter said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." He arrived at the ranch a few hours later. He says, "It was a different person from the one I had known before." He said, "What happened?" She said, "There was a mandatory chapel service here, and I went and I sat on the back row like I always do, waiting for it to be over. But then this thing happened, and I don't even know how to talk about it. I don't have the words to describe it. This thing that just felt like the most loving presence I have ever experienced." He said, "She's a different person than ever before." He said, "I couldn't think of any theory or even a word that described this kind of change within my own discipline. That part fascinated me, so I thought, wait a minute. If a personality can change literally overnight and it's permanent, shouldn't I be interested in it as a psychologist?" He went on to write a book, and his study said, "As a person is guided to a new place of authentic truth within himself or herself, peacefulness and inner strength ensue, and a positive shift results. People who experience spiritual transformation are sources of untapped potential for universal human healing." His daughter is now over 30, she's in her 30s, and still a changed person. Joseph had a decision to make, and he leaned on love. He called for love. When we lean on love and allow the presence of love to move in our life, it is that presence that begins to change us. That presence is what allowed Joseph to make the decision that he did. And the final thing that we know Joseph did was to follow his highest guidance and inspiration. When the angel appeared to him, an angel is symbolic of divine messages, our intuition, our insight. How many of you can recall hearing or feeling some sort of guidance or a gut feeling, something that you knew you absolutely needed to follow?